You're listening to SM Media, the #1 place for exclusive content.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Pro Wrestling Show right here on SM Media. I'm Scott McPike, delighted to be your host as always. Got a very special guest in this week's episode. I'm joined by the current star of ICW, Molly Spartan. Molly, it's a pleasure to welcome you onto the show. Thanks very much for joining me.
No problem. Thanks very much for having me, Scott.
No worries. How you been?
Good. It's quite toasty today, which is quite nice.
How's that?
Weather-wise, which is surprising for Scotland. But yeah, no, it's good.
And obviously the past year's been unlike any other. Obviously you're still kind of getting to grips with the wrestling business. How have you been finding the last year?
Unusual, I think, is probably a good word to use. It's been an interesting and a learning process, for sure. And it's given us a better chance to sort of start working towards like the cameras rather than people, because for all our days, especially in wrestling, you're sort of taught to feed off the audience and to sort of react to what they are doing. So to go into matches and there's nobody there bar you, your opponent, and a referee, it's definitely been interesting. But I just see that as it's been a chance for us to sort of focus on what we do in the ring. As well as obviously it's really going to be the learning curve is when we go back to actually having an audience to see how much of an impact it's actually had on us all. But yeah, it's been interesting. I think that's the right word to use. It's not been bad, but we're all just hoping to get the crowd back, to be honest.
Definitely. Do you remember the last time you wrestled with a crowd?
It was Grado's big family bash at the Pavilion, and it was weirdly me and Angel Hayes. We just seemed to not get rid of each other, which was fun. But before that, it was strange because like wrestled Angel Hayes at the Pavilion Theatre, and that was like the day before the first lockdown. Right. Like it was the day before it, because I remember us all sort of chatting about like, well, we won't be doing this for a while kind of thing. But even before that, the show before that, it was me and Casey in Germany. So even the thought of like we were wrestling in other countries at the very beginning of the year of 2020, and then just nothing. Was obviously quite a shock to the system, and I actually mean the system, because obviously with training and especially in wrestling, there's a sort of common sort of phrase known as ring rust that like you'll hear like guys that have been away and coming back talk about, and it's the fear of getting that, because over the years of training and stuff like that, your body gets used to doing things that the average person doesn't. So yeah, it's that weird fear of having that when we return.
Definitely. When did you first decide you wanted to be a wrestler?
So for me, it was a bit different. So when I was young and a teenager, sort of watching it, I've always been bigger. Right? It's not me going, oh, well, it's me, telling me I look great. Like, no, it's not that at all. I've always just been a bigger girl. I've always just been bigger than the girls that were around me from primary school to high school and beyond. And I was always fine with that. I was always comfortable in my own skin and confident with who I was and what I was as a person. But because of that, when I'd watched wrestling, I never seen anybody that reflected back at me. Right, okay. So for years, it wasn't that I didn't want to be a wrestler. It was just I assumed that if I tried, I'd be rejected. Right, okay. Because like, it's nothing against her, but I'm not Kelly. Like, I just don't look like, and I don't act like Kelly. And that's fine. I mean, I think the closest person sort of when I was sort of starting to think of that, like, what did I want to do with the rest of my life kind of thing, was maybe Beth Phoenix. But even still, she was this big, blonde, beautiful American. And let's be honest, the one I met a Scottish person that was in the WWE at the time was Drew.
Yeah.
And him to elocution lessons. So he's now got this weird Scottish American hybrid accent.
Yeah.
So it was down to the case of they didn't want my voice, never mind just who I was. So instead, I went down the route of thinking, well, if I can't be in the ring, and if I'm not wanted in the ring, I could be wanted outside the ring. So I actually started going down the sort of, how would I get into the creative process and how would I get into sort of the making of shows more than anything. So I've got like my degree in television, because when I went onto WWE's website, one of the qualifications that they were looking for their sort of the creative talent sort of thing, that sort of process would be these degree, like this education sort of level. So I went down that route. So within that, I ended up working for ICW. I ended up working backstage for ICW. And genuinely, it was just as like a work placement. I did a project with Billy Kirkwood. Then I met obviously Mark Dallas. And basically at that time, I offered him a free camera use and free microphones and light. And at that time, that was great for him, because I remember one of the first shows I did with ICW, like they sold out the Classic Grand, and that was massive for the company at the time. It was such a huge thing. Everybody was buzzing and so excited. But obviously now, in comparison to a smaller show, the crowd's even bigger than what's selling the Classic Grand it was. The way it's gone now, by the time that was big. So getting a free camera was a massive like expense spared kind of thing. So they were like, yeah, in you come, use the camera, cool. So I ended up doing that route. So I ended up sort of helping in the backstage sort of side. So I filmed the promos, I helped sort of direct them and produce them kind of thing. So anything that happened backstage for about 5-6 years was myself, and then obviously Veronica Lestrange and Jennifer Louise, we became the sort of the crew backstage, and that was our role. And it's weird when I talk about becoming the wrestler, it sounds like some mad rom-com story, because at the time, I remember we were doing a show in Studio 24 in Edinburgh. It was this really, like, it was this rock venue kind of thing, just back off the Royal Mile. And we did shows in there every, like, Sunday at a Fringe. And I remember we were taking the ring out the back door, and I remember it was pouring it down with rain, like all the water in the sky was falling that day. And I was standing with Wolfgang. Right. And at that time, we weren't even like, we were work acquaintances, like we were friends, like we were friendly, but like we didn't massively know each other. But I don't know why, but someone came over me to ask him, like, what's next for you? Because it felt like everybody else was doing something next, bar Wolfgang, but he felt like he was on the level of everybody else, kind of thing. And I was just asking him, like, what's your plan? Like, what's the next thing you want to do in wrestling? And he said to me, like, he wanted to coach. That was his thing. He felt like the next thing he could offer was coaching. But obviously at the time, you had PBW and you had Source, two predominant sort of well-established schools in Glasgow. And they were both run by people that he knew, and he didn't want to upset the other to go into the other. But he also had this idea of his own of how he'd want to sort of coach wrestling and who he'd want to have coach by his side, kind of thing. But he was, one of the worries was that nobody would show up because he had these two established schools. And I said, okay, well, I'll be student number one. I'll be your first student. That means you're over that hurdle. So if you get one, you'll get two. If you get two, you'll get four, kind of thing. Like, that's how usually it seems to work. So I remember saying that to him, and it genuinely was just chat between two folk that were sort of going. And I remember a year later, he sent me a message. He's saying, "Were you serious about being student number one?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like, my mum's taught me, if you say you're going to do something, even if it comes to the time and you don't want to do it, you're doing it. So I was like, sure. And at that time I thought, right, this is the chance for me to learn a different perspective. It's a chance for me to understand what happens in the ring. I'd learned everything on the outside. I just hadn't learned what was on the inside. And it was that sort of thought process of, like, the referees are all trained, and like everybody in WWE has at least some form of training. So I thought, right, this is my chance to do that. And it was really weird on the sense where within like the second week, there was that sort of feeling of like I was where I was meant to be.
Yeah.
At the time, Viper or Piper Niven, depending on how you know her, was absolutely crushing it in Japan, and she was doing it with all the airs and graces of being herself. She was just so confident in who she was, and like that was very inspirational that somebody could go to those lengths, go that far, just being themselves. And yeah, it was that sort of weird notion of like I was where I was always meant to be and where I've always wanted to be in all seriousness. But I think where the time I was growing up as a teenager, it was very much of the time of the size zero model and things like that. So the idea of being bigger just was, which now when we reflect on it is ridiculous that that's what the media and society sort of pushed and portrayed. And it still does to an extent, but not as much. Like people are embracing themselves, this is what I'm doing in wrestling. But yeah, like that's sort of how I became a wrestler. Which again, when I'm saying it's a mad rom-com, of course, people in wrestling know that me and Wolfgang are now husband and wife.
Yeah, and see, obviously, how important has Wolfgang been for you, kind of personally and professionally?
It's a strange one. Like obviously, personally, massive.
Yeah.
Because he is now my husband, and in wrestling, you do end up sort of forming. It's a very strong trusting relationship, and that's it. Like one of the main things in wrestling is trust. You trust every time you step in the ring with someone that they are, even if they're not at the same level as you as a performer, they're at least safe enough to be in the ring and that you're not in any danger. And of course, with the wrestling sort of side of things, when I ended up training, we did end up getting closer and finding out we had loads in common. We liked all the same stuff. Plus, we both understood wrestling. Like, it's not uncommon for women in wrestling to end up dating male wrestlers purely on the stance that they understand what you're doing and where you're going and things like that, because it is very difficult for someone who's not in wrestling to understand that most weekends maybe you can't be with them or hang out with them because you're going to sit in the back of a car and drive 5 hours down south to wrestle for 15 minutes to then drive all the way back up. But that's what you do, that's life. But if you're dating a wrestler, they at least go, oh, is it Liverpool? Like that's sort of how it works. And yeah, like personally a massive thing. But like the interesting thing about our sort of business side of things is that we haven't really, it's not that we obviously supported one another when it comes to the training side of things, but when it comes to actually what I've done in wrestling, it's sort of been off my own back. Like he's always been there to support me, and he's always been there to sort of fully be behind me. And when I've said, I'm going to do this, he's been like, yes. But when it comes to everything I've done, any countries that I've went to wrestle, to working for ROH, to working for ICW, it has been me. And I think I'm very proud at that, because I know there's a lot of people that just assume like, oh, she's got the booking because she's Wolfgang's missus, but that is not the case in the slightest. I think there's maybe been Future Shock was a place that we both worked, but it was for very different reasons. Like I was brought in to be part of the stable, and Wolfgang came with us and he did his own thing kind of thing. But it wasn't that we were booked. I wasn't booked because of him, and he wasn't booked because of me. But yeah, like it's that strange. Like we're both in ICW. We've both been in ICW at very different times. So it doesn't. Yeah, it's that weird sort of thing when it comes to the business side of things. We are on our own paths.
Yeah.
Just there to support each other while we go along it.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you've worked in places like GPWA and FSW, winning the women's title there. Like, what's been some of your early kind of favourite memories?
Obviously, like I'm very proud of the school I come from. So GPWA is obviously the Glasgow Pro Wrestling Asylum.
Yeah.
And especially being part of the first ever school, like my class was essentially the guinea pigs.
Who was in that class?
So the people that I know, there's loads of people, but the two that have like are on ICW now are me and Kyle Chaos were sort of the two that were in the first. There was loads of other ones, CS Rosies and stuff like that. And Soldato's actually part of that class too. But when you watch it, like me and Kyle, it's mad. We were actually talking about it the other day, me and Kyle, of like, we found like the first photo of the first ever training session and me being like, mate, we're on the network. But yeah, there was a few sort of faces in that, but it was just that sort of interesting like optimism that was in us of just like, hey, let's see what happens. But yeah, like we've done massive. But yeah, I'm so proud of the school I'm from. Especially, I think it was obviously 2020. It was voted one of the top 10 schools in the world, and it's because of how they go about and the way that they train folk. It's done in like class stages. So like your first sort of 8 weeks, you get up to, you're expected to be at a certain point. If you're not at that certain point, they address why you're not at a certain point and what you can go about in order to get to there. And then you go into another class, which gets you up to another point, and then you're sort of let into the main class. And I know even when we're returning back to classes, we're obviously in bubbles, sort of training bubbles. But even with that, there's sort of going to be sort of the intermediate class, which they're sort of refining things. And then there's the performance class, where it's people like myself and your Kyle Chaoses and your Angel Hazes and Anastasias and such like that will be in order to sort of refine them as performers. So they do look at that, and there's even, we've got the association with the Iron Girders gym in Parkhead now, so there will be things like strength and conditioning classes. There's the option of actually having a gym membership as part of being part of the school now. So they are sort of focusing on the whole aspect of it. It's not just show up, pay your tenner, we'll train you, and then you've got to do it on yourself. There's this whole sort of ethos behind the school in order to actually produce talent that can go on the WWE network and can go out there. And I feel like I know myself, like I didn't start going to other promotions until I'd done, well, at the time they were known as nights at the Asylum, but they're now like your £5 wrestling shows and your sort of Wrestling Experience Scotland shows are sort of there in order for you to get your first taste of performing in front of a crowd and performing in front of a crowd that's not your family as well. Before you sort of start going out into the big bad world and working with people that you haven't even met yet, or you've only exchanged a couple of tweets with. And it does sort of, I think it's a school that does prepare students for the reality of what the wrestling business is. Future Shock was very like a very defining moment for me, and it was a time where for the first time I was able to sort of sink my teeth in becoming Molly Spartan, because it was an interesting thing. Like the first time I went down, I genuinely thought it was just, let's give her a chance. And but I also knew the talent that had come from there, and the talent that was there at the time. I mean, Lana Austin was the champ, and she's a main stage in sort of British wrestling, not just female wrestling. But even then, you had Zach Gibson, James Drake, Ashton Smith, T-Bone were all main stage for that promotion. So I knew that there was a certain caliber that was at this promotion going in straight away. So I knew that there was an opportunity there to sort of try and show out and try and go, hey, like, bring me back. But what I didn't expect was them to bring me back for a full year, which was great. And when I was given that opportunity, I was like, yeah, I'm not screwing this up. So yeah, it was very much a chance of taking the bull by the horns and sort of trying to fully figure out who Molly Spartan was and how did she conduct her business and how did she sort of go forward with things. And it allowed, it was so much fun, it was great. But and also being able to sort of start the journey that was with Casey Owens, which obviously has now developed into the She-Wolves, and with the now retired Jayla Dark, before she decided to hang up the boots, was great because she'd always been around in the Scottish scene as well. So yeah, I owe Future Shock a massive debt and gratitude, because I think that's really the sort of the first time I would really class myself as a professional wrestler.
Yeah.
I wasn't just trying to be. It was the first time that a promotion had fully given me sort of the hold of the reins for the women's division, and also given me their title, which is a massive honour, because of the women that have held it previously. None of them were slacking in the talent department.
No.
So yeah, it was a massive honour to hold that.
Brilliant. How did the Ring of Honor thing come about?
I'd like to know myself. I'll be honest. So it happened so quickly. I remember I got so obviously my main stage at Ring of Honor is Mark Haskins, and I had sort of the privilege of working alongside him and his wife at TNT in Liverpool. And although we never stepped in the ring together, they're just a lovely pair of human beings. And he messaged me. I remember I walked into the living room with my phone, and it was just a message from him saying like, "Hey, Ring of Honor are trying to get hold of you. They've asked me if I could send you a message to get your phone number and your email address off you." And I went, and threw my phone across the living room. It was just like, ah! And obviously Wolfgang's like, what's the matter? And I was like, Ring of Honor are trying to book me. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah. So that was mad then. And I remember, it was like a weird funny story. So that happened. I got the email through, I think it was the Monday. I got the email through confirming everything on the Tuesday, and I was in training at the time. And I remember us lining up to do our roles, like the things we basically do. And I had Kyle Chaos on one side, and a boy called Curtis on the other side. And you could just see that I was like, and he was like, what's the matter? And I was like, I've just been booked for Ring of Honor for Sunday. And they were like, that's great. I was like, So, and then I ended up that night sort of perfecting a thing that I wanted to sort of start doing as sort of part of my moves. And it was that weird way where, so on the Sunday, so that happened on the Monday, got a message from Mark Haskins, all confirmed by Tuesday. On the Sunday, I had been in London and I had been wrestling Veda Scott,
right,
who renowned female professional wrestler, also dates Speedball Mike Bailey, and Speedball had been on the ROH show on the Sunday, so a week apart. And I remember hitting this move and Speedball going like, yeah, can I have a word with you? And I was like, yeah, what's up? Like, I thought it was feedback. And he was like, why did you not hit that on Veda? And I was like, sorry. And they were like, why did you not hit that on Veda? And I was like, in all honesty, I figured it out on Tuesday. Unless I was a time traveler, I couldn't. And he's like, that's cool. It's cool. Keep doing that. I was like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, it was very quick and out of the blue, and it was a massive honor. Like, I watch Ring of Honor. Like, I actually actively watch it. I sit and watch all matches on YouTube. I've got the CM Punk Samoa Joe rivalry on DVD, and I've got all of that, and the names that come from it, and like even what the first match that sort of defined the company between Daniel Bryan and Brian Kendrick when he was Brian Danielson and Spanky, like, it's still on YouTube and it's incredible. And yeah, so I know the people that are there that still have clout. So the fact that I got to go in, and Mandy Leon was interesting going in with her, because I didn't know this at the time going in. And I did know it, but it hadn't like sunk in. But this was like some of her first matches back from injury. Like, she'd been injured, and this was like some of her first matches back. So even she was like, and I'm like, why are you? That's my job. And I actually asked her, wait, are you being like this to be kind, to make me feel more relaxed? But no, like, she was, and I really hope that I can work with her again in the future. And yeah, like, I really look forward to in the future beating her up in the nicest way possible. But yeah, it's yeah, it was great working with them. It was an honour to work with them, and I really hope I can work with them again.
And has there been any mention of maybe working with them potentially down the line?
There has been chat, but of course the world went on fire, so it kind of stopped. But there has been, like, there's always been a flow, a conversation flow. So it's not a never kind of thing, but it's just, yeah, it's like, yeah, no, we're keeping an eye and everything's cool, but yeah, you know, the world's kind of still a wee bit on fire. So yeah, that genuinely is like the main reason why nothing sort of progressed. But I feel like that's the world right now.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Who's been some of your favourite people to work with so far?
There's too many. Like, honest, like I think I'm very lucky on the sense that I'm yet to work with anybody that I don't want to work with again, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like I've always been able to sort of, even with people who are having a bad day or they're not, like, I've always been able to find a way of making things work. But I think that's just me in life. If something goes wrong, people normally look at me and go, "What are we doing?" I go, "Right, give me 2 minutes, let me think about it." So yeah, like, of course there's people that I love working with. Like, I'd say Mandy was one of the people that I loved working with, but again, there's this massive long line. Like, of course I love working with my tag partner Casey Owens.
Yeah.
When I actually think about her, like, she was my first ever match in the tag team. So it was me and Carmel Jacobs versus the Owens twins. So she was my first ever match. She was my first ever singles match, and now she just seems to follow me everywhere. Angel Hayes is an incredible talent. Like, she's got so many years to go with her. Like, the fact that she's at this level at her age now is mind-blowing, and she's just got loads and loads of miles to go, and I'll be very surprised that if years down the line she's not signed to some place. But there's loads. I could honestly go on. You've got your Veda Scotts, your Casey Spinelli's that sort of internationally. You've got Alexis Falcon, Lizzie Evo, Rio, Charlie Evans, Millie McKenzie, Lana Austin, of course. Yeah, I could genuinely go. Gia Adams, love working Gia Adams. She's a big girl like me, and we love knocking the lumps of each other. Yeah, there's loads. There's absolutely loads. Anastasia, Scottish one. Anastasia up here, big girl, 5'10", stunning. Legs. My measuring tape couldn't go that far to work with. But yeah, I just hope that they all like working with me, because I enjoy it.
Brilliant. Obviously, you mentioned ICW. Like, first of all, how good's the company to work for? And secondly, obviously, this year they've moved to the WWE Network, which is insane. Pardon the pun.
Pardon the pun.
Like, it's how good is that to get those many people kind of watching you now? It
is mental, especially like, so from coming from where I've come from and how long, it's mad. There's a lot of people that don't understand how long I've been there. And when I talk about being overlooked and always being there, it's true. It's a weird sort of thing where it is like I've been there longer than a lot of people. And I think for a long time, I was away sort of wrestling, doing all these things, working for ROH, traveling across the world, like literally traveling around the world wrestling. I couldn't wrestle in my back garden, which was mad. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't wrestle. I did wrestle for the company that I had worked for years. And I do think there was an element of complacency there where I was too close to the source in order to be seen. So it was when I came back and I did, like, my debut was the last show that ICW had fans at, and was weirdly against none other than Casey Owens, because it always is. But yeah, and it was great coming to that, and it was really interesting going out and actually being known and being the crowd favourite coming out. Was nice as well. So that idea of like there were fans that knew the work I'd put into the company beforehand, and then coming back was a big deal. And also being part of, essentially I was part of the team that got the eye of the WWE to watch. Like I was there when there was the chats that started and things like that before the initial move to the network. And yeah, it's I'm proud of the fact that we're on the network, and we should be on something like that.
Yeah.
There should be that kind of eyes on us. And the fact that now it's on Peacock in America, which is in, how many times I think it was like 34, 36 million homes in America, which is just maybe shy of the 7 times the population of this country, of Scotland. It's mad to actually think of that. Like that's a lot of people. That's in a lot of homes. But yeah, so it's weirdly this sort of. There was a time where I was a bit annoyed that I was like, oh, I've got to get in a car and travel 4 hours all the time to wrestle, and I can't I can literally walk to the venue from my house. Can I just please go play there? So yeah, there was a point where I was a bit like, oh come on, and then eventually going, okay, come show us, come play, and knowing again it was that sort of opportunity where I needed to take the bull by the horns and just go, look, this is what you could have had a long time ago. But yeah, like I feel like now that I'm there, I am ready to be someplace like ICW as well. And there was many years, I think the early sort of future shock Molly Spartan wasn't ready for a place like ICW, but the she-wolf, the beautiful bruiser, and the son of professional wrestling definitely is. And being part of the crew again in an unusual era where we're trying to build a following when there is no one in the room. Because obviously wrestling, a massive part of wrestling is the crowd. And it's been so exciting to watch, sort of seeing WrestleMania with a crowd was incredible. And even the last AEW pay-per-view when it was stacked full of people was incredible. And there was this new sort of certain buzz about it. But yeah, it has been an honour to be there, to be part of the crew. I just feel like I'm back at square one, where I was part of the crew when we were in the small venues and trying to scrabble to get there. And now we're, again, back in a venue with nobody there. Like, what's the new hurdle? What's the new challenge? But yeah, like being part of that, and it has been fun and interesting. It's just now, right, it's time to get people back in. Like, come on, like, let my makeup run off my face 5 minutes into the ring, because there's so much heat, because there's so many people in here. Like, although I'm going to look horrific in the photographs, I'm going to be smiling inside.
And see, obviously you mentioned about your kind of creative kind of things as well. Like, see the past kind of few months when there's obviously the thing with the zombies and things like that. Do you watch wrestling and like have the like try and kind of write it in your head, like how you would change it? Is that really kind of weird?
I think everybody does that.
Yeah.
I think if you look at it, I think because I literally studied the creative process of how things were filmed and the break. Like everything I wrote in uni was wrestling related, from my dissertation, which was about the propaganda that surrounded the 1991 match between Sergeant Slaughter and Hulk Hogan around the Gulf War. Like I did a piece on what it was a split between superheroes and wrestlers and what their costumes said about them. Like where you didn't have to watch wrestling, but if you looked at a figure of them or a picture of them, you can sort of get a sense of who they were before they even said a word or moved at all. So like I did like that sort of thing as part of being uni. So when it comes to people's gear, I am fascinated. Like I get friends who, if we're not together watching a pay-per-view, message me going, right, I want the gear ratings and why they're rubbish and why they're good. And like I'll break everything down and go, this defines this and all that, because that's what I did. Like that's really something that I focused on a lot. So yeah, I think, I mean, we all rewrite wrestling in our heads to what we want, but sometimes you've got to try and look at it in a bigger picture. And sometimes I'll say things like, look, this isn't what I want, but this is how I think it will probably go. So I like to, in my mental head, write ahead rather than writing now, because what's happened now, nothing can change, but you can sort of try and think the creative process forward.
Do you think of it long term? Like,
I try and think of things long term, or I try and think of like how things could go. So it's like even if you think about it now, like I sort of discussed with friends and stuff like that, how I thought when Roman came back and was being like the Roman that he is now.
Yeah.
I was sort of thinking around the ways of like I remember saying like, well, I think the Usos should join him, and that's the bloodline. That's a faction called the bloodline. Like that's the whole thing, and discussing that. And obviously, I think it's progressively heading that way, kind of thing. And I hope it sort of heads that way where obviously he had his run-ins with Jay, and now Jimmy's back. Now he's having the run-in with Jimmy, and then it can sort of work that way. And this is how it's going now. Is pretty much how I said to like my friends, like, this is how I think it'll probably go, because that makes sense, but it's exciting, it's interesting, and there's loads of factors put in place for many things to happen. So you could even be, if you've got other factors in place like the Usos, it means that for example, if Roman loses the title, you could easily protect him by blaming one of them, or them be the issue, and there's loads of things and that sort of thing. But yeah, like I try to sort of look at it, and I try not to just, I think because of the internet, I think we're obviously a different breed of wrestling fans now, where we actively can shout into the abyss of like, I'm not happy, this is how it should be. But you've sometimes, that's fine, but I feel like sometimes there's people, like I've unfollowed people on Twitter because all of their tweets is just like, I hate this. This is rubbish. And I was just like, stop watching. Go away. Like, try and see, not even try and see the good, try and see what could happen. Try and think of like how this could become interesting. Rather than just being all like, look at it and why has it come to this point, or where could it go more than anything, because the where it could go can still be exciting. We all mentally rewrite it, because we all mentally in our head think like, and then Shawn Michaels comes back and hits a super kick, because who doesn't want to see Shawn Michaels hit a super kick? I was doing it with Edge, but I was just lucky and it happened.
So what's obviously your plans for the future? Obviously, Wolfgang's doing really well in NXT UK. Is that somewhere you could see yourself going?
Genuinely, I'd happily go anywhere. Of course, NXT UK, NXT, Christ, they could put me on Raw. I'll not complain. But yeah, it's that kind of thing where I genuinely am having so much fun now. Just doing what I'm doing. And I think that I think there's a lot of people that just are so focused on getting to NXT or getting to AEW or getting to where it's that kind of thing where sometimes I'm like, yeah, it's kind of really clear that that's it. But I'm comfortable at a stage where I'm really enjoying what I'm doing now, that I think that's half the battle ready, where it's that idea where I think if I was so mentally focused on getting there, like that's good to have a goal, but if that's all you care about and it doesn't happen, then then it becomes a thing of like you become bitter and resentful. So I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. I think my work is of a caliber where NXT UK could be interested in signing me, that's what I'm proud of. That's what I want. I want to be able to work hard enough to be at a caliber where getting signed isn't unfathomable.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to enjoy what I'm doing so that I'm getting signed for clearly being at a level where I could be signed and where I'm clearly progressing enough that I'm coachable, which I think is a big thing for NXT is that, are you coachable? There's a lot of great talents out there, but I think they're not getting signed because I think they see them as there's not really much room to coach there or to sort of mold, where I think if I show my development, that's a sign of being coachable. I just, right now, I am just progressing to be the best possible version of Molly Spartan that I can be, to enjoy myself in doing so, because I think when somebody's being genuinely enjoying what they're doing or being genuine in their work, you enjoy it more, you appreciate it more, and you want them to succeed more. Like, I know I'm like that when I watch people. I really just want to help. It's also helping the independent scene, because there are a lot of people that have now been signed to NXT UK, and rightfully so, the people that have been signed. But then it means that there are these independent slots that are there to be filled, and if I can be a positive influence in that and help people progress and get better around me, then it also shows that I'm a person that can help people get better too. That's my goal, is to enjoy what I'm doing, wrestle in front of people, and to get to be the biggest heinous bitch you've ever seen in the UK wrestling scene.
Brilliant. Are you all right closing with some quick fire questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Brilliant. Who do you think's the best wrestler in the world right now?
Wolfgang.
Good answer. Good answer. Your dream match?
Me and Edge. Why not? It's a dream match. Like, give me Adam Copeland. Come on, Edgy. Come at me.
Brilliant. Your favourite match so far?
For me or for watching?
Your favourite match you've had, and then we'll do a favourite match you've watched.
That's so hard. Like, you understand how difficult that is. I had loads and loads of fun in a match it was me and Wolfgang versus BT Gunn and Casey Owens in like Motherwell. I think that's the most fun I've had in a wrestling match.
Casey said that as well.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Like, it was just nonsense. Like, I slapped BT Gunn and he kicked me up the arse and I went out and So I think that's the most fun I've had in a match. So let's say that. Like, professionally, I've got loads that I've like really sort of developed or made me think loads in me performing or adjusting. Like, there's never so I always say a bad match is when somebody gets hurt. But as long as nobody's hurt in a match, it's not a bad match. It's maybe a learning experience.
Yeah, definitely. Your favourite match you've watched as a fan?
Live. And oh my God, I'm heavy putting over my husband, but that's okay. Live recently, my favourite match was Wolfgang and Stevie Boy at Shug's House Party 6. And it was the match to crown the new champion after the passing of Lionheart.
Yeah.
I think it's that because it was in a room of people that were hurting, and we were missing someone and hurting. But for Stevie to return and somehow be incredibly better than what he used to be, and he was already an incredible athlete beforehand, and for them to put on a show of that caliber in a room that was hurting, it's exactly what was needed. And like, that spear and that poison rana were so sick that I had like wrestlers from down south coming up to me going, how? And I was like, so yeah, I think that was one of my favourite watches. But also, like, there's the ladder match at Blackpool, which was great to watch. There was Kaylee, Tony, and Kim at Blackpool as well, which was just exciting to watch. Kaylee winning the title after Tony at Cardiff was fun because I was the only Scottish person in the bit I was sitting in that was happy that she won. I was surrounded by raging folk, and that was fun. Me just going, "Go yourself in!" That was fun. No, there's loads. Like, and I could just come round to my house. I'll put on good wrestling, and we'll have a laugh.
Brilliant. I think I know this answer because I think Casey gave out the answer I think you're going to give. 4 people you would start a faction with.
Oh, well, me and Casey. Oh, who did she say? Who
Wolfgang
did
and
she
BT.
Oh, right, okay. Like that's easy. I'm thinking just girls. Like,
Right, yeah, do I
of
go
course
girls.
you'd say that because that's what. Right, it's only lassies. So me and Casey, because if I don't, she'll murder me in my sleep. Shayna Baszler, because she gives me the fear. I think she's incredible. And Asuka,
Very
because
good.
she's incredible too.
Very
Asuka, Shayna Baszler, me, and Casey. To me, Casey could be the tag, and they could be like the Raw champion and the SmackDown champion. There we go.
That would work. Very good. Favourite film and TV show?
My favourite film was like I think like as a general favourite film is Back to the Future. Loved it since I was wee to now. But I think the most important question, a lot of people have like the list of like your top 10 favourite films, right? And that's fine. But I think the more important film is your top 10 films that you always watch when they're on the telly. Because like what films do you not pass? So like for me, you've got like Planes, Trains and Automobiles and like Beetlejuice, and they're films that if they're on I'm like watching this. Like, there's films that are beautiful that may be in your favourite film category, but you don't watch them all the time because you'd be suicidal. You know what I mean? But yeah, and TV show Bob's Burgers because it's just tremendous.
Brilliant. Interesting fact about yourself.
Oh, there's a few. Oh, I'm a really good cook, like incredible. I'm straight edge. Yeah, I'm a straight edge, but I managed bars for years, and I'm actually a very good. Like I used to teach people how to make cocktails, even though I'm straight edge. Good cook. I could do a Donald Duck impression, but I'm not doing it because people make me do it. There's a few. There's a few weird ones that I'm just going to keep a secret.
Brilliant. Final question. Would you rather you won the Women's Championship or Wolfgang won the WWE Championship?
Which Women's Championship?
Whatever the WWE won the top one. We'll go for the top one.
He's been there longer, so I'll let him win first and then I'll go get it after him.
Brilliant. Molly, it's been an absolute pleasure for you on the show. Thanks very much for doing it. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Thanks very much.